Tonight, we are stepping back into a world without electricity, without clocks, and without certainty. A single night in a medieval village. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Let us know in the comments, or simply in your thoughts. Where are you listening from tonight? Are you lying in bed, resting after a long day, or keeping quiet company with the night? Wherever you are welcome here. Now, let us move slowly into the darkness of a medieval night. A gentle hush falls over a faraway time and place. Under a canopy of countless stars, a small medieval village lies quietly at the edge of darkness. The last hues of dusk have faded into a deep blue, and a cool mist gathers above the fields. In the still air, the silhouettes of thatched rooftops and a solitary church steeple stand against the night sky. All around, an ancient peace settles in as the world slows to the tender rhythm of night. In this tranquil hour, the noises of day have long since died away. A wooden cartwheel that creaked at sundown now rests silent by the roadside. The distant laughter from the evening's end has softened into memory. Now only the soft whisper of a nighttime breeze remains, stirring the treetops and carrying the faint scent of smoke and hay. The village is calm, wrapped in shadows and starlight, awaiting the long night ahead. Let us wander quietly into this scene, stepping gently through the cool darkness. There is no rush here. Each moment stretches out comfortably. As night deepens, the village and its people sink into a world of quiet dreams and gentle breathing. With a slow and patient gaze, the journey begins into the heart of the medieval night, where every sound and silence tells a story. The hour is late, the mood is soft, and the village is ready to share its secrets, drifting slowly into the night. Night fully blankets the countryside now, as the village slumbers at its center. The dirt road that leads into the village is pale under the faint glow of the moon. On either side of the lane, fields stretch out into the gloom rows of harvested wheat stubble and fallow patches fading into the darkness. A wooden fence lines the way, its posts and rails silvered by starlight. Beyond, gentle hills roll off to the horizon, now only shadows upon shadows. The air carries the earthy scent of tilled soil and the sweetness of hay gathered earlier in the season. All is hushed. Only the soft chorus of crickets accompanies the slow steps of night. At the village's edge stands a lone oak tree, ancient and broad. Its leaves whisper softly in the breeze, as if greeting the night traveler with a secret. Under its boughs, the road narrows and passes by a small shrine, a weathered stone cross mounted on a mossy pedestal. In the daylight, villagers pause here to say a brief prayer for safe journeys. Now, in darkness, the cross is barely visible, just a rough shape against the sky. Yet its presence is comforting, a silent guardian at the entrance to the village. Moving gently between these sleeping buildings, the village reveals itself in small details illuminated by the moon. The first cottages come into view. They crouch low to the earth with their thatched roofs and wattle and daub walls, humble shapes huddled in the night. Their walls are pale in the moonlight, where whitewashed daub reflects a faint glow. Thatch eaves overhang the little doorways, casting deep shadows. Most doors have been bolted shut since the last light of dusk tonight. Like every night, the villagers have shuttered themselves safely inside. The windows of these homes are small and few. By now all shutters are closed firmly, latched against the cool air and any curious spirits that might wander by. Not a single pane of glass glints. These homes have no glass windows, only wooden shutters or oiled cloth to keep out the chill. From one or two cracks in the shuttered windows, a very dim orange glimmer escapes the last dying glow of hearth embers within. Otherwise, the cottages are dark, their inhabitants tucked in for the night. A narrow footpath winds onward between the cottages. Underfoot, the ground is a mix of hard-packed earth and scattered straw. The footpath has known countless steps by day, but at this hour it lies empty and still. One can hear the soft crunch of dry dirt at each careful step. Now and then, a flat, smooth stone set in the path catches a ray of moonlight. These stones, placed by villagers to avoid mud, gleam faintly as stepping stones through the darkness. The path threads past a low stone well in the small central square. The well's wooden bucket hangs motionless from its rope, and the water below sleeps undisturbed. Beside the well stands a trough for animals. By day, oxen and horses drink here, but tonight the trough is abandoned. A faint reflection of starlight ripples on the water's surface as a night breeze brushes past. Not far beyond the well, a narrow brook winds past the edge of the village. Its waters trickle gently over smooth stones, the sound barely rising above a whisper. By day, this brook reflects the sky and provides water for washing and play. At night, it runs dark and unseen, except for a silvery glint where the moon catches a ripple. Reeds and rushes line its banks, their tall grasses swaying softly. A little wooden footbridge crosses the stream on the northern path out of the village. Under it, the current slips by with a soft gurgle. Even the stream seems hushed, as if flowing a little slower under the spell of the night. The faint babble of water mingles with the whisper of the wind, a soothing undertone that accompanies the village's sleep. In the middle of the village, a few larger structures loom quietly. The dark outline of the village church rises modestly against the sky. It is not a grand building, just a simple chapel of stone with a modest steeple, but it anchors the village. Its bell tower is silent now. The bell rang softly at curfew earlier in the evening, a signal for all to bank their fires and head to safety indoors. Now that bell hangs idle, waiting for morning when it will toll the dawn. The church's arched doorway is closed and barred. Along its eaves, swallows' nests from the summer lie quiet, the birds long since asleep. In the graveyard behind the church, rows of wooden crosses and a few carved stones stand in sombre silence. By moonlight, the grave markers cast long shadows over the dewy grass. It is a peaceful resting place by day, but at night the graveyard lies in a hush that even the bravest villagers seldom disturb after dark. Tonight, only the wind moves gently among those stones, producing a soft sighing sound as it passes through the grass and the ivy climbing the churchyard wall. Not far from the church is the village alehouse, a slightly larger timber-framed building. Earlier in the evening, its door was open and a warm glow spilled out, along with the low murmur of villagers sharing a last drink. Now the door is shut and barred from inside. Through the gaps in the shutters, a weak light still peeks out, then flickers away. The tavern keeper has likely doused the lamps and retired. A wooden sign hangs above the door, swinging a little in the breeze. Its painted emblem of a foaming mug is hard to discern in darkness, but it creaks softly on its iron chain. Near the tavern, a stray cat prowls in the alley, its eyes catching the starlight with a green glint. It slips silently around a corner, drawn by the smell of something edible left behind in the scraps. Further along the lane, the blacksmith's workshop is quiet and dark. By day, this spot rang with the sound of hammer on iron and glowed with the heat of the forge. Now the forge fire is long extinguished, and only the faint scent of charcoal and metal lingers in the cool night air. The anvil sits cold on its stump. A few tools hang silhouetted against the open-sided shed, unmoving. Even the smith's great hound, who would bark at strangers in daylight, is curled up asleep by the workshop door, only lifting an ear as some small nocturnal creature rustles in the bushes. As the path continues, one passes by a small row of cottages where the thatch roofs nearly touch one another. They are built close, sharing walls in places, almost like one continuous dwelling divided by thin walls. In this cluster, a tiny chapel shrine is set into a niche between homes. A little statue of a saint watches over passers-by. In the dim light, the carved face of the saint is gentle and patient, gazing eternally down the lane. Below the statue, someone has left a dried bundle of herbs or flowers as an offering or a charm of protection. The herbs sway gently now, releasing a faint fragrance of rosemary and thyme that mingles with the cool night air. Everywhere, shadows reign supreme. The moon is only a slender crescent tonight, providing just enough light to distinguish shapes, not colors. Under the eaves, in alleyways between cottages, darkness pools thick and black. A listener standing in the village center can hear his own heart if he pays attention, for the world is so still. Now and then, a slight scratching or a drip of water from a rooftop breaks the silence briefly. But these sounds only deepen the sense of quiet once they cease. Time passes slowly here under the night sky. As one's eyes adjust, more stars become visible overhead, an endless river of silver pinpoints. The Milky Way arcs across the heavens, a misty band of light that some villagers call the Road of Souls or the Path of Saints. In this era, long before electric lights, the sky is a brilliant map of stars. Tonight, a few of the brightest stars twinkle over the silent rooftops, their light finding its way through wisps of passing clouds. A gentle glow to the north hints at the aurora on rare occasions, but on this night, only darkness and starlight hold dominion. The village seems untouched by time in these hours. One could almost believe that the world has always been this way. Silent, peaceful, lit by hearth and moon, watched over by ancient oaks and quiet saints. The lanes, the well, the cottages all lie as if under a sleeping spell. But inside these simple homes, life continues in its quietest state. Families dream and rest, gathering strength for the labors of tomorrow. The world outside remains calm and still beneath the gentle night sky. Now, attention turns inward, to the glow within those cottage walls where the villagers have settled down for the night. Inside the cottages, a different world unfolds, a world of dim glow, warmth, and the soft sounds of slumber. In one small home near the village centre, a family has settled in for the night. The cottage has only a single room, its floor made of hard-packed earth that has been swept clean. In the centre of the room rests a low stone hearth where a cooking fire burned earlier in the evening. Now only red-orange embers remain, nestled amid grey ash. They cast a faint, flickering light that dances on the rough wooden beams of the roof. Shadows sway gently on the walls with each dying flicker, as if the night itself breathes within the cottage. The smoky scent of peat and wood lingers in the air, mingling with the familiar musty smell of straw bedding and the faint sour tang of spilled ale and old stew. Against one wall, a simple wooden bedstead holds a straw-filled mattress. Upon this bed lie the father and mother of the family, already deep in much-needed sleep. The father's heavy wool tunic has been laid aside, and he sleeps in a long linen shirt, his weathered hands finally at rest. His breaths come slow and steady after a long day of labour in the fields. Beside him, the mother's form is curled and snug under a patched woolen blanket. She still wears a simple shift, her braided hair loosened for the night. One of her arms rests protectively around a small bundle nestled between the parents, their youngest child, a toddler, cheeks flushed and rosy in the warmth of the bed. The little one sleeps soundly, curled up like a dormouse, comforted by the presence of both parents on either side. On the other side of the room, near the hearth, the family's two older children share a sleeping pallet on the floor. They have an old straw mattress as well, though thinner, and laid directly atop the earthen floor with only a woven mat between to reduce the chill. The boy, perhaps 10 years old, is sprawled on his back, mouth slightly open in the abandon of deep sleep. His sister, a few years younger, lies curled at his side, their hands almost touching in sleep. They share a thick blanket made from sheep's wool. The village spinner wove it, and their mother dyed it a soft brown with walnut husks last autumn. Tonight that blanket is pulled up to their chins, for the night air has a bite even indoors. The sister instinctively nuzzles closer to her brother for warmth, and he shifts, draping an arm over her unconsciously. Both wear simple nightshirts, a bit tattered at the hems, but clean from the washing done earlier in the week. Their bare feet peek out for a moment as they adjust positions, then tuck back under the covering. A faint smile rests on the girl's face. Perhaps she dreams of something pleasant, a sunlit day, or chasing butterflies by the stream. The boy gives a gentle sigh in his sleep, legs twitching as if he runs in a dream, but soon he is still again. In the quiet of the cottage, the only sounds are the soft chorus of breathing and the occasional crackle from the embers. The fire's glow illuminates small details around the room. Near the sleeping children, a roughly carved wooden toy soldier lies on its side, where it was dropped in drowsiness. Not far away, on a low stool, a half-finished piece of knitting and a bone needle rest, work set aside by the mother when it grew too dark to continue. A three-legged wooden stool and a small table stand by the wall, holding the remnants of the day, a wooden bowl, an earthenware jug now empty of ale, and a crust of brown bread saved for the morning. Above, hanging from the rafters, are bundles of drying herbs and braided garlic cloves. Their silhouettes sway gently whenever a draught sneaks through the thatch or under the door. These hanging shapes cast spider-like shadows that stretch and shrink on the walls with the firelight, but the family is long accustomed to these shapes in the night. At the foot of the parents' bed lies a slumbering dog, curled into a tight ball on an old cloak. It is a medium-sized brown farm dog, loyal and alert even in its sleep. Every so often, its ears twitch at a distant sound, the rustle of a mouse in the wall or the muffled hoot of the owl outside. The dog's nose twitches as it scents the familiar, comforting smells of its home. The people, the faint aroma of tonight's supper lingering in the pot, the livestock just beyond the thin walls. Satisfied that all is well, the dog lets out a long, contented sigh, its tail giving a single thump against the floor before it drifts into a deeper sleep. Not all creatures in the cottage are asleep, however. In the thatch of the roof and the cracks of the walls, tiny movements betray the presence of nocturnal critters. A mouse emerges cautiously near the grain sack in the corner. It scurries in quick spurts, stopping to sniff the air. Finding a few husks of wheat on the floor, the little mouse busies itself, its tiny nibbling sound so soft it could be mistaken for the crinkle of straw. Hanging from one of the rafters, a bundle of dried grain is tied in cloth, a precaution to keep it out of reach of just such mice. The mouse sits back on its hind legs and peers around, whiskers twitching in the firelight, before darting back into a hole when the dog shifts its feet in sleep. Elsewhere in the rafters, a fat house cat prowls silently. Its eyes glint as it watches for the mouse's return. But even the cat is in no great rush. Well fed on scraps and a successful hunt earlier, it pauses to stretch luxuriously on a warm wooden beam where heat from the hearth has risen. The cat settles there, half-closed eyes observing the room below, its tail curled around its body. Soon enough, the cat too begins to doze, lulled by the warmth and peace. The single-room dwelling holds more than just the family. Partitioned off by a rough wooden half-wall is a small space near the door where a pair of goats are sheltered for the night. The barrier is simple, a makeshift pen within the cottage, just enough to keep the animals from wandering over the sleeping humans. The goats occasionally stir, their hooves thudding softly on the packed earth as they adjust in their straw bedding. One goat lets out a gentle bleat in her sleep, almost like a quiet mumble, then goes silent again. The smell of the goats is strong but familiar, a mix of warm animal, hay, and a tang of milk. The family long ago ceased to mind sharing their home with their animals. The body heat of the creatures also lends warmth on chilly nights. A small lamb, orphaned early in the spring, also sleeps curled against one goat's side, having been adopted by the nanny goat. It breathes quickly and softly, dreaming its simple lamb dreams as the goat's steady respiration comforts it. Across the room by the far wall, grandmother rests on a narrow cot stuffed with straw. Though her back often aches from the hard bedding, she is thankful to have a space to lie down. The firelight reaches her face in flickers, highlighting the gentle, time-worn lines etched there by years of sun and care. Her eyes are closed, and she murmurs quietly in her sleep, perhaps reciting a prayer even as she dreams. Upon her thin shoulders lies a quilted blanket, made from scraps of old clothing. She stitched it herself many years ago, and the pattern of squares and rectangles tells a small history of the family's garments. She stirs and drapes the blanket higher under her chin, keeping the night's chill at bay. An old woolen cap covers her grey hair to further keep her warm. At her bedside, a walking stick and a pair of worn leather shoes sit neatly. Hanging from a peg above her bed is a rosary of wooden beads. It sways slightly as a draught finds its way through a gap in the doorframe. Before she fell asleep, grandmother lightly whispered her evening prayers on those beads, fingers moving from one to the next in the dim firelight. Now her hand still loosely holds the rosary, a final bead tucked between her fingers as her breathing steadies into sleep. In this single room, 3 generations slumber under one roof. The space is cramped by day when all are active, but at night it seems to expand in the quiet. each person's presence blending into the soft chorus of familial rest. The children occasionally make small sounds, whimpers from a dream, or a soft cough each time, causing the mother, even in deep sleep, to shift slightly, as if to check on them. The father's arm remains draped protectively over his wife and toddler, even as he snores gently. Grandmother turns on her cot, finding a more comfortable position for her old bones. All these subtle movements are like the barely noticed ticks of a clock, natural, rhythmic, comforting in their familiarity. In another cottage not far away, a similar scene unfolds, with slight differences. The blacksmith's house, attached to the workshop, has two small rooms instead of one. In the main room, the blacksmith himself, a broad-shouldered man, lies on a straw mattress by the hearth. He has a simple bed frame he built from sturdy oak, which creaks under his weight as he shifts in his sleep. A thick bear fur, a prized possession he traded for years ago, covers him. Even in slumber, a frown creases his brow. Perhaps the day's toil in the forge has followed him into dreams. But his wife, sleeping on a second pallet alongside him, looks serene. She curls around a pillow stuffed with duck feathers, one hand still resting on the swelling of her belly. She is with child, and the baby due before winter. The blacksmith's two apprentices share the next room, each on their own mat on the floor. One of them mutters something unintelligible in his sleep, causing the other to stir and groggily hush him with a mumbled word. Then they both fall back into silence, the younger one hugging a rolled-up cloak as a pillow. In a corner of their tiny room, the dull red glow of the forge's banked embers seeps through a cracked door, casting a faint light across their sleeping faces. Even the little village inn has its inhabitants at rest now. In the loft above the alehouse's main room, the tavern-keeper's family sleeps among straw and old sacks of grain. The innkeeper himself snores softly atop a heap of blankets, having indulged in some ale after closing. He sleeps soundly despite the hard floor. His wife and their daughter share a real bed frame pushed against the wall, a luxury in this village. The girl clutches a small rag doll to her chest, the doll's yarn hair visible in a stripe of moonlight coming through a gap in the eaves. Down below, in the tavern's main room, a solitary traveller lies wrapped in his cloak by the hearth, allowed to stay after arriving late. The fire in the tavern has burned low, but a few coals still cast enough warmth to keep the traveller comfortable. He shifts now and then on the wooden bench that serves as his bed for the night, adjusting his makeshift pillow, a folded spare tunic. Each time he moves, the old floorboards creak softly, but no one is around to mind. The tavern's common room lies in shadow, benches and tables empty, a drying ale stain on the plank floor the only evidence of the evening's merriment. The traveller sighs and settles again, lulled by the distant sounds of the night outside and the knowledge that he has shelter until morning. All throughout the village's homes, people and animals share in the nightly pause. Every cottage shelters its own little world of sleepers. In one, a newborn infant fusses quietly and is rocked back to sleep in her mother's arms, while an older sibling curls closer to the warmth of the family bed. In another, an elderly widower rests fitfully, not quite asleep, gazing at the ceiling's shadows and recalling old memories to comfort himself. Across the way, the miller's family is crammed into their loft above the mill. The rumble of the nearby mill stream is their lullaby as they lay in a row like spoons. Some homes have shutters that don't quite seal, and a stripe of moonlight falls across the floor, illuminating a forgotten pair of shoes or a basket of cloth. Other homes are completely dark, their inhabitants hidden under darkness as complete as the night outside. Yet, in each home, despite discomforts or the hardness of the bedding, there is a prevailing sense of relief and rest. The day's toil is over. The night offers a chance to recuperate. Mothers no longer stir porridge pots. Fathers no longer swing axes or hoes. Children no longer chase each other between huts. All is still. The village that was full of activity under the sun has now contracted to these quiet breathing bodies and the few embers glowing in their hearths. Here, in the deep of the night, even the worries and sorrows each person carries are, for a time, set aside. Quarrels from the day are suspended in dreams. Aching muscles slowly relax in the gentle embrace of sleep. Hungry bellies are given respite from labor. The humble cottages with their fragile walls cradle these families through the dark hours, protecting them from the outside chill and the imagined terrors that lurk in the blackness beyond. In this shared slumber, there is a kind of unity, the whole village joined in vulnerability and trust that the night will pass peacefully until dawn. A few hours before midnight, these same cottages were not so quiet. In the twilight, just after sunset, the village hummed with the gentle activities of evening. Families returned from the fields and workshops with tired limbs and hungry bellies. Smoke curled up from every chimney and open roof hole as small fires were kindled to prepare the simple supper each household would share. The comforting aromas of cooking drifted through the dusk. The earthy scent of boiling turnips and cabbage, the savory notes of onions and herbs, the yeasty fragrance of bread pulled fresh from the hearth. Children's voices, once shrill with play in the late afternoon, grew subdued as they clustered near their mothers, waiting eagerly for their portions. Fathers cleaned mud from their boots at the threshold, or hung tools on pegs before stepping inside, bringing with them the cool air of the coming night. In our family's cottage, the mother tended a black iron pot hanging over the evening fire. Inside, a thick stew, a pottage of lentils, diced carrots, and cabbage leaves, simmered slowly. She stirred it with a wooden spoon, adding a pinch of salt and a few sprigs of thyme from her garden stores. Earlier that day, she had foraged a handful of wild mushrooms at the wood's edge, and now they bobbed in the broth, releasing their rich, earthy flavor. The children sat on the floor nearby, watching the firelight play on the walls and inhaling the promising smell. The eldest boy had been tasked with slicing what remained of the round loaf of rye bread baked that morning. With a careful hand he sawed through the hard crust, using his father's eating knife, dividing the bread into portions for each family member. The father, having washed his hands and face from a basin of rainwater outside, stepped in and took a seat on the low stool by the hearth. He removed his leather cap and wiped his brow, weary from the day's ploughing. As he breathed in the aroma of the stew, he felt his stomach rumble and allowed himself a rare smile tonight. At least, there was enough to eat. When the stew was ready, the mother ladled it into wooden bowls. It was a modest meal, thick and hearty, though with no meat on this ordinary day. Each bowl had mostly broth, with a share of the soft vegetables and lentils. Meat was saved for special occasions or Sundays, unless a bit of salt pork or a rabbit snared in the fields could be spared. This night, a small strip of bacon had indeed been added for flavour, and its smoky taste now permeated the broth. The family gathered on their benches and stools around the little table. Before eating, all bowed their heads as the father murmured a simple grace. thanking God for the food, the harvest of the fields, and asking for continued provision. The baby, too young to understand, gurgled at the warmth and light, while the grandmother, from her place on a cushion near the hearth, whispered "Amen" along with the rest. They ate slowly, savoring each spoonful. The bread was passed around, each person tore off their piece from the dark, crusty loaf. The crust was very hard, perfect for dipping into the hot stew to soak up the flavors. The children dunked their bread eagerly, softening it before chewing. By the glow of the hearth, steam rose from their bowls and mingled with the smoke in the air. No one spoke for a few minutes. The first stage of eating was always a quiet contentment, as warmth spread through their bellies. The mother gently blew on a spoonful of broth to cool it for the toddler on her lap. The little one soon reached for the bowl with tiny hands, spilling a bit on the wooden table. The mother chuckled softly and guided the bowl to the child's lips, letting the baby sip the flavorful liquid. A dribble ran down the toddler's chin, and the father reached over to wipe it with a bit of linen, his calloused face softening at the domestic scene. As their hunger abated, soft conversation blossomed in the dim firelight. The children told small stories of their day. The beetle the boy found crawling on a pumpkin in the garden, or the little song the girl sang to the goats when she helped her mother milk them at dusk. The father recounted a brief exchange he had with a neighbor in the fields, joking that old Bernard nearly fell asleep while scything the wheat rows. The grandmother offered a few wise words about the importance of finishing the harvest before the weather turns, reminding them all of a proverb about the ant and the grasshopper. These exchanges were gentle and familiar. The family had heard variations of them many times, but in the comfort of evening, such routine talk was as soothing as the meal itself. Laughter was muted so as not to waste energy, just a low chuckle here and there, or a smile that could be heard in the voice. Across the village, similar scenes played out in other homes. In the blacksmith's cottage, the smith's wife poured each of the apprentices a cup of thin ale, while the smith himself gnawed on a leftover heel of bread with cheese. At the miller's house, they had the rare treat of fresh fine bread, a perk of the miller's trade, and perhaps a bit of honey saved from a neighbour's hive, which the miller's children licked off their fingers with delight. The elderly widow, on the far end of the village, whose children had moved away, ate alone by her small fire, dipping a stale piece of yesterday's bread into a bowl of weak onion broth. She whispered a prayer for her family far away, then finished her meagre supper slowly, feeling each creak of her joints as she shifted by the hearth. At the tavern, a couple of local men who had no families to dine with sat near the fire, sharing a pot of the same stew that the innkeeper's wife had prepared for paying guests. They chewed thoughtfully and in companionable silence, listening to the distant sounds of families closing up their homes for the night. Once the main meal was done, the nightly routines continued. In our family's cottage, the mother carefully picked up the toddler and gave the sleepy child a sip of water from a wooden cup. The child, now full and drowsy, lay heavy against her shoulder. Meanwhile, the father took the bowls and began scraping the remnants back into the pot, a precious little bit of stew that would be eaten cold in the morning for breakfast if it wasn't claimed by a midnight hunger. The eldest boy licked his bowl clean before handing it over, earning a gentle scolding glance from his mother, though she well understood not wanting to waste a single drop. The girl gathered the wooden spoons, one of which had fallen to the dirt floor, and wiped them with a clean rag. There was no running water to wash dishes at night, especially in darkness. Instead, they would rinse them quickly with a splash of water from the bucket and set them aside. Detailed scrubbing might wait until daylight. In each home, lamps or candles were few and precious. Most families relied only on the hearthlight for illumination once night fell. Perhaps one tallow candle might be lit briefly, its flame flickering orange and casting long shadows. In this family's cottage, the mother lit a single rushlight, a thin strip of dried rush plant dipped in fat that burned with a weak flame on the table. It provided just enough light for her to see as she cradled her toddler and rocked gently, humming a familiar lullaby. The tune was a slow, repetitive melody, an ancient song villagers passed down for generations to soothe children. The words were simple and half-whispered, about a bird in the forest and a star in the sky watching over the home. As the mother hummed, the toddler's eyes grew heavy. The father finished tending to the dishes and placed the lid over the cookpot. He then moved to secure the cottage for the night. First, he banked the fire. Using an iron poker, he spread the embers evenly on the hearthstone, then shoveled ash over them to dampen the glow. The fire would not be fully extinguished, that would risk a cold home and a difficult restart come morning. But by covering the coals with ash, they would smoulder safely, giving off a gentle heat without open flames that might spark. The dim red light in the room dulled further, shadows growing larger and softer. Next, he closed the wooden shutter of the single small window. He lifted the latch and swung the shutter inward, then secured it with a wooden peg so it wouldn't flap in any breeze. Immediately, the night sounds outside grew more muffled, and the interior of the cottage cozier. Finally, the father lifted the heavy oak beam that served as a bar for the door. With a grunt, he set it into the brackets, barring the door firmly. This was an essential nightly act, ensuring no stray animal or unwelcome stranger could push into their home while they slept. The solid thud of the bar dropping into place was a reassuring sound to the family. It meant they were safe inside. All around the village, one by one, doors were barred and secured. Those with the luxury of locks turned iron keys in creaking locks. Others simply set wooden beams or dropped sliding bolts into place. Shutters were pulled tight and perhaps reinforced with a hook or leather strap. In a few homes, cloth was stuffed into cracks to keep out drafts. The world of each family shrank to the size of their cottage interior. Outside was the night, vast, dark, and unknowable. Inside was light, however faint, and the familiar objects and faces that made a home. Before sleep, many families engaged in small rituals of comfort and faith. After banking the fire and barring the door, our father took a moment by the hearth, where a crude wooden cross hung on the wall above. He bowed his head and spoke a soft prayer into his folded hands, barely louder than a breath. He prayed for protection through the night, commending his household to God's care until the dawn. The mother, still humming to the now sleeping toddler, gently rocked and quietly added her own plea that her children be kept safe from illness and bad dreams. The grandmother, from her corner, whispered the final lines of the Lord's Prayer, which she had been reciting under her breath. Even the children mumbled their own innocent prayers. The young girl clasping her hands as she lay under the blanket, moving her lips in a familiar rhyme learned at church. The boy squeezing his eyes shut to remember a patron saint's name to ask for blessings. Not every family was devout in equal measure, but the fear of the dark and the unknown often drew even the less religious to murmur a protective charm or prayer on such nights. In some huts, a mother might draw a small cross in ashes on the threshold, or a father might spit on the hearth embers, an old superstition to ward off evil spirits with the sign of the cross and the element of fire combined. These practices, half faith and half tradition, gave the villagers a sense of agency against the vast uncertainty of the night. The conclusion of the night's routine varied from home to home. Some families, especially those who rose very early, went to sleep almost as soon as supper was done and chores were finished, retiring while the last light of dusk still glowed faintly. Others, particularly on a pleasant summer eve, might linger awake for an hour or two, talking softly around the hearth, or even stepping outside to feel the cool air. A father might smoke a pipe of pungent herbs by the doorway, watching bats flit against the dim sky, or a couple of neighbours might finish their ales together on a bench outside the tavern, reluctant to leave the companionship for solitude. But on this night, which carries a hint of chill, most choose to seek the warmth indoors. In our family's home, by the time full darkness had settled, the children were already bundled onto their pallet, yawning and rubbing their eyes. The mother had laid the toddler in the crook of her arm on the main bed, singing softly until those tiny eyelids fell shut. The father had stoked the goat's bedding one last time and patted the dog's flank, whispering a command to guard well through the night. The dog thumped its tail, understanding in its own way that it must be alert. Then the father eased himself onto the bed next to his wife and child, careful not to jostle them too much. Grandmother had long since reclined on her cot after saying her prayers, pulling her cap low over her ears to shut out any draughts, and closing her eyes to the lullaby of the crackling hearth. One by one, each family member drifted towards sleep. The mother fought her heavy eyelids just long enough to mentally plan the next day's needs. Perhaps she thought about grinding grain in the morning or mending her son's torn tunic, simple thoughts that soon blurred into the onset of being dreams. The father felt the ache in his shoulders from the ploughing, eased slightly as warmth from the sleeping bodies next to him spread under the covers. He listened for a moment to the soft breathing around him and the dying pops of the fire, and in that comfort he too gave himself over to rest. Elsewhere in the village, the innkeeper finished wiping down the tavern tables and bade good night to the last guest before barring the tavern door and climbing up to his loft. The blacksmith carefully raked the coals in his forge to ensure nothing would flare up while he slept. Fire was a fearsome threat in a village of thatch, so he double-checked that every spark was contained. Satisfied, he said good night to his apprentices, each retreating to their blankets. The miller secured the mill's big lever and closed up the mill house, the sound of the water wheel turning slowly in the dark, a constant lullaby. Mothers hushed their children and laid comforting hands on smooth foreheads. A few villagers stepped outside briefly to relieve themselves by starlight before turning in, hastening with cloaks drawn tight to get it done quickly and return to the safety of their homes. All of these small acts made up the fabric of nightly routine, repeated in much the same fashion day after day, season after season. Soon enough, every necessary task had been completed. Bellies were filled as much as the larders allowed, fires tamed, doors bolted, prayers spoken, and the village gradually surrendered itself to the night. For some, It was an easy surrender. The labor of the day made their eyelids leaden, and they slipped into slumber almost immediately upon lying down, thoughts evaporating like evening mist. For others, those racked with worry or hunger, the surrender was slower, coming only after long minutes of staring into the darkness or listening to the sounds of the night, and perhaps quietly weeping or sighing where no one could hear. Yet eventually, even they drifted into uncertain dreams. One by one, voices had quieted, movements ceased, and the tiny points of light from each hut were snuffed out or hidden behind shutters. The village crossed the threshold from evening into night's deepest hours. Now all that remains of the day's bustle is the memory that lingers in these walls. A faint smell of cooked broth still hangs in the air. The wooden bowls, cleaned as best as possible, sit on the table, awaiting the light of dawn for a proper wash. The crust of bread saved for morning rests in a cloth, a small insurance against pre-dawn hunger. The tools by the door remind that tomorrow will bring more work, but for now they stand idle. In each heart, the hope is the same, that the night will pass without incident, and the morning will find them alive and well, ready to greet the sun and resume the humble rhythms of life. With the night routine complete, the village has finally relinquished itself to the embrace of darkness and the gentle cadence of sleep. As midnight approaches, the soundscape of the village becomes a gentle symphony of the night. With human voices hushed and daily labor stilled, smaller, subtler sounds step into prominence. At first, one might think it completely silent, but for those who listen closely, the night is alive with quiet murmurings. Inside the cottages, the most comforting sound is the soft chorus of breathing. In one home, the father's slow, deep snores form a steady rhythm, a reassuring reminder of his presence in the dark. Beside him, the mother occasionally sighs in her sleep, as if releasing the last of the day's worries. A child gives a little whimper from a dream, and then is soothed by a half-conscious pat from the mother, who in her slumber responds instinctively to her child's voice. In the corner, grandmother's breathing is a faint, wispy sound, sometimes catching as she shifts her old bones for comfort. The dog by the hearth emits a quiet snore of its own, a sort of soft waffling exhale. Every now and then its paws twitch, and it makes a muffled woof under its breath, chasing something in a doggy dream. These gentle noises of life sleeping are like a lullaby within the cottage, the family's own music of the night. There is the occasional creak of the wooden bed frame as someone moves, or the rustle of straw as the children turn over on their pallet. A blanket being pulled up causes a soft brushing sound against the cloth of a nightshirt. From the rafters comes a delicate ticking, the cooling of the iron pot hanging above the hearth. Having been hot from cooking, the metal now contracts in the cooler air, making tiny clicks that punctuate the silence like distant raindrops. Under the roof, the thatch sometimes settles, a faint crackle as dried reeds shift slightly with the night's moisture. A lone spider, disturbed by the change, scuttles across the thatch, its 8 legs making no sound at all to human ears. But perhaps the cat's ear twitches at the subtle vibration. Within the walls, the subtle gnawing sound of a mouse nibbling a grain can be heard when all else is still. It is nearly imperceptible. A minute, repetitive crunch. The house cat's ears pivot toward it. A moment later, A sudden, soft scuffle breaks the quiet as the cat pounces from the beam to the floor with a muted thud. The mouse squeaks, a tiny, almost pitiable peep, and then the sound stops abruptly. Silence returns in the cottage, broken only by the cat's faint purr of triumph as it carries its catch off to a dark corner. Soon even that purr fades, as the cat curls back up to sleep, content. Meanwhile, through the shuttered windows and closed doors, the sounds from outside filter in. The cottages are thin-walled, so the nocturnal noises of nature are still audible to those inside, especially in lighter moments of sleep. The constant backdrop is the whisper of the wind. A light breeze moves through the village lanes, brushing gently against walls and fences. It sets the leaves of the oak tree at the village edge to rustling. A soft, intermittent applause that rises and falls. At times the wind passes through the narrow gaps of a shutter or under a door, producing a faint whistling tone, almost like a distant flute. These airy sighs make the cottages feel even cozier by contrast, as sleepers unconsciously snuggle further under blankets when a cool draught sneaks in. From the nearby brook comes a hushed babble of water. In the daytime it's a merry gurgle, but at night it seems subdued, as if it too respects the quiet. One can just make out the gentle tinkling of the stream over stones, a soothing and consistent murmur that lulls those who can hear it. In the miller's loft by the mill stream, the family is serenaded by the low grinding turn of the water wheel. Now that the mill is disengaged, the wheel rotates slowly just from the water's current, creaking rhythmically. To them, it's a familiar heartbeat of the night, a reminder that water flows and life goes on even in darkness. Across the fields, the insect chorus that began at dusk continues its serenade. Crickets hidden in the grass sing in waves. For a few minutes, they chirp vigorously, a tapestry of tiny, rhythmic notes weaving through the silence. Then, as if on cue, they all fall quiet at once. A minute or two passes in relative silence, and just when it seems they might have gone to sleep, one cricket tentatively resumes its song, followed by another and another, until the night air is filled once more with their gentle chirrups. This rise and fall of the cricket chorus is as steady as breathing, a natural lullaby under the moon. In marshy spots by a distant pond, frogs add their occasional croak to the nighttime orchestra, a slow, hollow sound that echoes softly and then is gone. High above, an owl hoots again, the same owl that earlier flew over the rooftops. Now it has settled on a branch of the big oak, or perhaps atop the church steeple, a silent silhouette against the starry sky. Its call is a mellow, drawn-out hoot that carries through the stillness. Hoo, hoo, hoo. After a brief pause, it calls again. In one of the cottages, a light sleeper hears the owl and stirs, half dreaming that the sound is someone at the window. But then the sleeper settles, recognizing the familiar nightly visitor's voice. Owls are welcomed by villagers as mouses, and their nightly hooting is considered wise and almost comforting once one is used to it. Now the owl's cry is answered by another, farther off in the woods, and for a time the two converse with lonely calls across the dark. Not all creatures are quiet at midnight. Down the lane, inside a small stable, a restless horse stamps a hoof. The dull thud startles a barn swallow roosting in the rafters, who flutters its wings briefly before resettling. The horse perhaps dreamed of running free and half awoke, only to realize it is night and time to be still. It lets out a heavy exhale, almost a snort, and then all is quiet again in the stable. In the goat pen behind a house, one goat bell clanks lightly as the goat shifts position in her sleep, nuzzling her kid closer for warmth. That gentle bell sound is so familiar that it barely causes the family inside to stir. If anyone hears it at all, they smile faintly in their dreams at the thought of newborn kids frolicking and drift deeper into sleep. From the direction of the fields comes a distant cry, the bark of a fox on the prowl. It's a sharp, yapping sound, quickly repeated twice and then falling silent. In a henhouse beside one cottage, the chickens cluck softly and shuffle on their roosts, sensing a predator out in the night. But the fox will find no easy meal here. The henhouse is secured, and a vigilant goose in the pen outside stretches its neck and gives a low warning honk. A dog chained near the door of that house perks its ears and lets out a single authoritative bark into the darkness, as if to say, "We hear you, keep away." The fox, hearing the goose and the dog, decides to slink off toward easier hunting grounds. Within moments, calm returns. The hens settle, cooing quietly, as if reassuring each other that all is well. The dog circles in its spot and lies back down, the clink of its chain fading as it relaxes once more. From far beyond the village, other noises occasionally drift in. The moorland and forest beyond the fields have their own life at night. Sometimes, carried on the wind, the long, mournful howl of a wolf pack can be heard. Tonight, faintly around the midnight hour, such a howl emerges from the distant hills. It starts as a lone wolf's call, a drawn-out note that rises in pitch, then is joined by the chorus of its brethren, echoing across the valley. The sound is eerie and primal, an ancient song of wild creatures in the dark. In their sleep, a few villagers frown or stir. A mother pulls her child a little closer. But the howl is far away, likely miles off, and the villagers know their homes and hearths are secure. The wolves seldom venture near the village itself, especially with dogs and fires present. So the haunting howls become just another thread in the night's tapestry of sounds, soon melding into the background. In a moment, the night seems even quieter than before, as if holding its breath after the wild cry of the wolves. Within the security of the cottages, the sleepers remain mostly undisturbed by these distant calls. Protected by walls and the comforting familiarity of their own surroundings, they drift through their dreams. Perhaps in some dream, a villager hears the wolf's howl, and it transforms into something else, a mournful song or the wind through a hollow that their dreaming mind can accept. And so they continue to rest, unbroken in their slumber. Every so often, a slight noise will bring a sleeper to the edge of waking, the creak of a roof beam, or the soft thud of an apple falling from the tree outside and hitting the ground. A person might open bleary eyes for a second, registering the dim orange hint of the covered embers, or a sliver of moonlight peeking through a crack. They listen, heart gently thumping, wondering what stirred them. But hearing nothing alarming, only the same familiar cricket chirps or the wind's sigh, they exhale and turn over, pulling the blanket up and slipping back into the depths of sleep. These brief moments of semi-waking are part of the night's pattern too, as natural as the phases of the moon. Beyond the individual sounds, there is a profound sense of stillness that underlies everything. It's the kind of stillness in which one can almost hear one's own heartbeat when awake. The earth itself seems to be breathing slowly. If one stands in the village square at this hour, one might hear the combined subtle noises as a single, gentle presence. The rustling leaves, the brook's murmur, the animals' soft calls, the sleeping breaths behind cottage walls all blend into a quiet harmony. It is the sound of a village at peace in the heart of the night. Time flows on, marked not by clocks or bells at this hour, but by the changing texture of the silence. As late night progresses, some of the earlier sounds taper off. The crickets become fewer as the night grows cooler. The breeze calms, and the oak's leaves fall still for a while. A hush, deeper than before, settles over the lanes and roofs. In this deep part of the night, even those creatures that were busy a few hours ago take a brief rest. It is as if the whole world is pausing, holding a gentle vigil under the stars. Within this pause, every tiny noise feels amplified against the background hush. The drip of condensation trickling off a thatch eave into a rain barrel sounds like a loud plonk in the quiet. A tiny crack from cooling wood in the fireplace echoes softly. The unconscious clearing of a throat by the tavern keeper, shifting in his sleep, might be heard by a stable boy in the loft above him. Each sound affirms life and continuity, preventing the silence from becoming absolute, yet none are jarring enough to break the spell of tranquility. This is the music of midnight in the medieval village. It is a subtle music, nothing like the lively tunes played on festival days or the chatter of the marketplace. Rather, it is a slow, ambient melody composed of nature's whispers and the gentle evidence of human life at rest. For any soul awake to witness it, these sounds bring a sense of calm reassurance. The village is alive, even in slumber. The natural world continues its ancient rhythms, and despite the darkness, all is as it should be. The sounds of the night gently cradle the village, ensuring that the people's sleep is deep and undisturbed. In this delicate balance of sound and silence, the night deepens, paving the way for the introspective hours where fear and superstition might stir in the minds of dreamers and the wakeful alike. Yet with all this peace and stillness, the deep of night can be an unsettling time for the human mind. In the darkness, imagination awakens, and age-old superstitions creep quietly into the thoughts of even the most practical villagers. The same shadows that seem calm by day now take on uncanny shapes. The same silence that is soothing can suddenly amplify a faint fear that something unseen may be lurking just beyond the edge of vision. As the hours after midnight advance, a subtle tension lies beneath the village's slumber. For this is the realm of fears and the unknown. In a tiny cottage at the end of the lane, old Marta lies awake on her straw pallet. She is a widow, living alone except for her cat, and tonight sleep evades her. She stares into the darkness above, where the thatch roof is invisible and the corners of the room have dissolved into black. Her old eyes play tricks on her. She thinks she sees a shape by the door, a hunched figure. Her heart quickens. For a moment, her mind races through possibilities. Is it a person, an animal, or something not of this world, come to pay her a visit on this moonless night? She blinks and whispers a quavering prayer, clutching the rosary beads she keeps under her pillow. The shape by the door does not move. Gradually, as her eyes adjust, Marta realizes it is only her own shawl hung on a peg, vaguely outlined by a stray sliver of starlight that sneaks through the eaves. She lets out a long breath, feeling foolish, yet relieved. Even so, she decides to light a small rush candle for comfort. With trembling hands, she strikes a flint to steel. The spark catches, and soon a tiny flame sputters on the dipped rush. The feeble light pushes back the darkness just a little, illuminating the familiar room, empty of intruders, empty of ghosts. Marta murmurs, "Thank God," crosses herself, and settles back. The candles glow beside her. She will let it burn a short while to soothe her nerves, even though fat is precious. Its light paints gentle shadows on the walls, and Marta's eyelids grow heavy at last. As she drifts off, she recalls an old lullaby her mother sang to ward off spirits and finds herself humming it under her breath. The words are nearly forgotten, but the melody comforts her until sleep finally comes. Marta is not alone in her late-night anxieties. In many cottages, there are moments when someone finds themselves hovering between sleep and wakefulness, and in that fragile state, ancient fears seep in. A young mother awakens from a light doze because she sensed her baby stirring. She lifts her head and listens intently. The baby is fine, breathing softly in the crib by the bedside. But now the mother's mind, roused in the pitch dark, begins to conjure worries. She remembers the village midwife's warning to always keep an iron blade near the newborn, lest fairies try to steal unchristened babes at night. Though she scoffed at the idea in daylight, now, in the featureless dark, she gingerly reaches out to touch the small knife she's placed under the cradle. Its cold metal gives her a bit of solace. No mischievous spirit of the old forest would dare come near with iron to ward it off. The mother listens to the night. Was that a faint scratch at the window, or just a tree branch? She thinks of the old tales her grandmother told, witches flying on broomsticks across the moon, gathering in secret groves under the stars, restless ghosts of those who died unhappy, wandering the roads at midnight, the good people, the fair folk, dancing in rings of mushrooms and leading stray travellers astray in the dark. A shiver runs down her spine despite the warmth of the bed. Gently, she places a hand on her sleeping husband's arm, reassured by his solid presence. He doesn't wake, but in his sleep he shifts closer to her, as if sensing her unease. The baby gives a tiny sigh, and the mother immediately refocuses on that innocent sound. She pulls the baby's blanket up, murmuring a protective blessing. "Angels guard thee." In her heart, she prays for morning to come soon, then forces her eyes closed, choosing to trust that her family is safe. Slowly, her breathing syncs with the baby's, and she slips back into slumber, the knife still tucked beneath the cradle and a small wooden cross hanging above it, catching a glint of dying firelight. For the villagers, the darkness itself is both a physical reality and a canvas for their fears. On nights when clouds smother the stars and the moon is new, the blackness is nearly absolute. One cannot even see a hand before one's face inside a cottage when the fire has burned low. Outside, the village paths are swallowed by an inky void. A person stepping out of their door without a lantern would feel as if they'd plunged under water, surrounded by a suffocating dark where every direction looks the same. In such darkness, the imagination can populate the void with all manner of horrors. A bush swaying in the breeze might be mistaken for a crouching beast. The outline of the old scarecrow in the distant field might resemble a lurking stranger or a ghost with outstretched arms. The villagers know these illusions well, yet knowledge does not fully banish the instinctive quickening of the heart when one perceives a form that should not be there. Children are especially prone to nighttime terrors. In one cottage, little Joanna, the blacksmith's daughter, suddenly whimpers in her sleep. She's caught in a nightmare. Perhaps at the tavern earlier she overheard a spooky tale about the nightmare. A wicked spirit, some say, sits on one's chest and gives bad dreams. In her dream, Joanna feels a heavy weight pressing down, and she sees a dark shape, like a gnarled old woman perched at her feet, cackling softly with a cry. The girl jolts awake, tears in her eyes. At once, her mother, who had been sleeping beside her, is awake too. She wraps the child in a comforting embrace. "Hush, hush now," she whispers, smoothing Joanna's hair damp with sweat. "It was only a bad dream, my love." The mother reaches for a small clay cup of water by the bedside and holds it to the girl's lips. Joanna drinks, her sobs subsiding to sniffles. In the shadows, everything still looks frightening to her. She clings to her mother's arm and points to the foot of the bed, where in her dream the awful figure sat. The mother peers into the gloom. There is nothing there now but their rumpled blankets and a faint shaft of moonlight. Still, to reassure the girl, and perhaps herself, she speaks into the darkness firmly. "In the name of Jesus, leave us be." It's half prayer, half commandment to any lurking evil to depart. Then she makes the sign of the cross over her daughter and herself. Little Joanna, comforted by this ritual and the warmth of her mother's body against hers, nods sleepily. "The Lord and Saint Agnes keep you safe," the mother adds softly, invoking the patron saint of girls. She begins to hum a gentle tune, the same one her own mother used to sing to chase away nightmares. Before long, Joanna has drifted back to sleep, the nightmare's power broken. The mother lies awake a few minutes longer, watching the patterns of shadow and light until she too dozes off, praying that no more bad dreams trouble her child this night. Superstition in the village is not merely the province of children. Grown men and women, hardened by work and life's struggles, carry their own quiet fears and beliefs. During daylight, these notions often seem silly or exaggerated, and many villagers laugh them off around the hearth. But in the solitary stillness of 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, when one wakes from a strange dream or cannot sleep, the old stories return with vivid clarity. The farmer recalls how his grandfather swore he encountered a ghost on the lane one night, a pale figure in a white shroud hovering near the churchyard. The baker's wife remembers the cautionary tale of a traveller who knocked on a cottage door after dark and was let in, only to reveal cloven hooves and vanish in a puff of brimstone, surely the devil testing the faithful. Tales of witches abound too. An old woman in a neighbouring village was said to turn into a hare at night and sneak into people's gardens. Another story tells of witches convening under the elder tree by the crossroads outside town, brewing storms and curdling milk with their spells. None of these tales can be proven, but in the midnight hours, no one would dare venture to that elder tree to find out. Even the landscape holds mysteries at night. The villagers tread carefully if they must step outside, for who knows what? Unseen eyes watch from the darkened woods, or what hidden pit or well won might stumble into. Long ago, in the time of their great-grandfathers, a man fell into an overgrown well on a moonless night and drowned. Since then, his restless spirit is rumored to wander the path, moaning in regret. Such stories are passed in whispers. A shiver might run through a listener even by a warm fire, but how much more potent are those tales when one is alone in bed, hearing a faint moan of wind that could be that poor soul's sigh. And so, each creak or stray sound often gets an explanation steeped in lore. If a window shutter bangs open suddenly in the night, someone might later mutter that the wild hunt rode through on the wind, and the force of their passing threw the shutter wide. If a child sleepwalks or cries out incoherently, an elder might later suggest a fairy was trying to lure the innocent soul away. A sudden chill in the room might be blamed on a ghost brushing past. These interpretations come readily to a people who have been taught by generations to respect the unseen as much as the seen. Within their homes, villagers employ small charms and tokens to ward off what they fear. Over doorways, some have hung sprigs of dried rosemary or rowan wood crosses, believing these repel evil. Under mattresses, a few mothers tuck sachets of blessed herbs like Street John's wort to prevent nightmares. The blacksmith, though a tough man, places a horseshoe, crafted by his own hand, above his threshold, with the prongs facing down to catch any malevolent spirit attempting to enter. He's also been known to mutter a Latin prayer he learned from a travelling friar whenever he hears an owl screech, unusually just, in case it's not an owl at all, but a witch's familiar or a banshee's warning. Such blending of Christian prayer and folk remedy is commonplace. The people use all tools at their disposal to feel secure in the dark hours. Despite all precautions, fear is an unwelcome companion on some nights. For those who lie awake, time moves slowly. The dark seems endless. A person might feel very alone with their racing thoughts, while the rest of the household sleeps peacefully. The mind can play tricks. The longer one stares into a dark corner, the more it seems something stares back. Some may silently recite scripture or an old rhyme to fortify their courage, repeating it until the words lose meaning and sleep finally reclaims them. Others might reach out to touch a loved one's hand or back, grounding themselves in reality to dispel the uncanny feeling of an invisible presence nearby. The warmth of another human body is a powerful antidote to the chill of supernatural dread. Of course, not every fear is of the supernatural. There are real dangers in the medieval night that lurk just as menacingly in villagers' minds. A sudden orange glow on a wall could mean the terror of fire, a constant fear in a town of timber and thatch. Many have heard of or remember tragedies in neighboring villages where a single spark consumed homes before anyone could wake. Thus, a sleeper might bolt upright, heart pounding, if they smell smoke or see an unexpected light, only to find it was a dream or a momentary waft from the banked hearth. They calm themselves by recalling that they banked the fire well, and that a bucket of water stands ready by the door, as is prudent. Still, a cautious father may rise to double-check the hearth's safety, just to ease his mind. Then there is the fear of human malice. Bandits or thieves are rare in such a small community, but not unheard of on lonely roads. A trader passing through last year spoke of a band of robbers that prowled the highways after dusk, preying on travellers. The villagers reassured themselves that brigands would find little profit in their poor hamlet. Nonetheless, a farmer who hears what he thinks are footsteps outside at midnight might quietly grasp the handle of his wood axe. just in case. He'll hold his breath and listen, every muscle tense, until the sound, perhaps just a deer stepping through the brush, fades away. Only then will he exhale and lay the axe down, convincing himself it was nothing. But you can be sure, he says, an extra prayer for protection before trying to sleep again. Illness is another spectre that haunts the darkness. In a corner cottage, a mother keeps vigil by a child with a fever, the little boy's forehead hot to the touch, even as the night grows cold. She has only a small candle and a bowl of cool water to comfort him. Each time the child moans or breathes oddly, her heart leaps with fear that an evil spirit or a demon of illness, perhaps sent by a witch's curse, might be trying to claim him. She whispers fragments of both folk charm and holy prayer. Begone, foul thing, this child is under God's hand, and uses a damp cloth on the boy's brow. Outside, an owl's shriek makes her jump. She crosses herself swiftly. The long night seems endless as she counts each labored breath of her son and watches the shadows shift. But she holds on to hope. If they can just make it to morning, surely her boy will improve with the sunlight. For it's well known in the village that illnesses often worsen at night and ease by day, as if the night itself empowers the malevolent forces that cause sickness. She nods and prays, fighting sleepiness, determined not to let her boy out of her sight until the first light creeps through the cracks. Thus the night hours are a testing time, a quiet trial of faith and fortitude. Each villager, in their own way, faces the parade of spectres that darkness conjures. For some, it is literal spectres, ghosts of departed loved ones, or the unquiet dead they fear to meet. For others, it is the spectre of disaster, fire, theft, illness, or accident that looms in thought. And for many, it is the nameless dread, a leftover of childhood when every dark closet held a monster and every whisper of wind was a lurking fairy or goblin. They live in a world where the boundary between reality and the supernatural is thin, especially at night. The church teaches them to have faith in God's protection, yet the old pagan law still runs deep in their blood. On a night like this, both the cross and the sprig of herbs hang side by side over the door, each a symbol of reassurance. However, it is important to say that most nights in this village pass uneventfully despite these fears. The imagined horrors stay imagined. The real dangers, thankfully, do not come. The door barred with an oaken beam keeps out any would-be intruder, human or otherwise. The low fires and careful minders prevent destructive flames. The prayers spoken do seem to bring a palpable peace, as if some benevolent presence watches over the sleeping town. And within the minds of the villagers, courage and reason usually prevail. If a man hears a strange noise, 9 times out of 10 he will find it was only the cat or the wind, and he will chuckle at his own jittery nerves. If a child insists a witch flew over the roof, the parents will soothe the child and attribute the scare to a horned owl in flight. Dawn will come, and in the cheerful light of morning, these fears will shrink back into mere stories to be told with a smile. Still, in the present moment, in this deep night, those fears, irrational or not, feel very real. They bind the community in a shared human experience, an understanding that all of them, rich or poor, young or old, carry some fear of the dark. This shared vulnerability makes them kinder to one another in the daylight. The next morning, the baker might slip an extra loaf to Widow Marta, knowing how lonely nights can be for her, and the blacksmith's wife will brew an herbal tea for the mother of the feverish child. These kindnesses are the community's answer to the terrors of night, solidarity and compassion by day, to arm each soul with strength to face the next night. And indeed, all through this fearful span of hours, there are subtle sources of comfort too. The soft glow of the church's presence in the village, even in darkness, stands as a silent reassurance. A cross atop its roof points towards the heavens, invisible now, but known to be there. Some say that at midnight, the spirits of the saints walk invisible through the village to chase away devils. And perhaps it is true, for nothing truly terrible ever befalls them this night. The familiar smell of ash and smouldering wood, the very scent of home, anchors them to the mortal, the ordinary. The closeness of loved ones, warm bodies huddled together under blankets, reminds even the anxious that they are not alone in facing the darkness. A father feeling his child's small foot against his leg in sleep will smile and let that simple contact banish thoughts of roaming ghosts. An old husband, waking from a dream, will reach out and feel his wife's hand and recall that there is love in this world stronger than fear. Slowly, as with all things, the peak of fear passes. The hour between midnight and the first cockcrow is said to be the darkest, when evil is strongest. But once that peak has been endured, each passing minute brings the village a little closer to dawn. Even without conscious awareness, the villagers' bodies and souls sense that the worst of the night is behind them. Those who were awake find themselves growing sleepy at last, as if some gentle force is easing their troubled minds. A grandmother finishing her quiet prayers feels a wave of peace and lies down, finally able to rest. The feverish child's breathing steadies as the crisis of the night passes, and the mother dares shut her eyes for a short while, trusting the remedy and prayers to hold. The father who gripped his axe loosens his hold, sets it aside, and succumbs to exhaustion, dreaming now not of thieves, but of ploughing his sunny fields. The collective tension in the air diminishes bit by bit, like a tightly wound spring slowly uncoiling. Outside, in the starry firmament, the constellations march onward. The villagers cannot see it, but the great wheel of the sky is turning toward morning. A faint breeze carries with it the tiniest change, a hint of coolness or moisture that often comes just before dawn. And with that subtle change, a lone rooster at a farm on the hill awakens. Sensing the approach of day, he lets out a bold, clarion crow. Its sound cuts through the final hours of night, a triumphant announcement that the darkness is nearly done. Many believe that at that very moment, any evil spirits that might have been roaming the countryside flee, unable to withstand the promise of sunlight contained in the rooster's call. Within the village, a few sleepers stir at the sound, not fully waking, but absorbing it into their dreams as a herald of hope. The widow Marta, half dreaming now, smiles in her sleep at the crowing, remembering that it means dawn is coming and no ghost would dare trouble her now. The young mother, cradling her baby, feels a calm settle in her heart. The worst is over. The night's fears, like shadows, are starting to retreat. Though darkness still reigns for a while longer, the power it held is broken by the simple cry of a rooster and the unseen but inexorable nearing of dawn. In each cottage, those final hours of night become a time of waiting and watchfulness, turning into relief. The village, having confronted its collective fears in the depths of night, now turns a quiet corner. All through the lanes and fields, an almost palpable sigh is felt, a gentle release of breath, as if the very earth knows that morning is on its way. In this way, fear and superstition are kept at bay until the sky begins to brighten. The people have endured another long night, their faith and forbearance intact, and soon the comforting routine of day will chase all phantoms away. While most of the village sleeps, there are always a few souls awake in the late watches of the night. Some are awake by design, others by circumstance or habit. Together, they form a quiet, unseen guard that helps carry the village through to morning. In these hours, survival is not about fighting battles or braving storms, but about small acts of vigilance and care that ensure everyone sees the dawn safely. On the northern edge of the village, near the sheep pen, Jacob the shepherd stands wrapped in a thick cloak. He volunteered to keep an eye on the flock tonight after hearing wolves howling in the distance the night before. Jacob is an older man, accustomed to scant sleep from years of tending animals. His loyal dog, Bran, sits alert at his feet. The two are positioned by a smouldering fire pit which Jacob lit earlier in the evening near the pen. The low flames and glowing coals provide a bit of warmth and a deterrent glow to any predator eyes watching from the darkness beyond. Jacob's breath mists in the cold air as he listens to the night. Every now and then he takes a slow walk along the fence of the sheep enclosure, lantern in hand, checking that all is well. The sheep are huddled together in one corner of the pen, mostly asleep, but a few ewes lift their heads as he passes, their ears twitching. "Easy, girls," Jacob whispers in a raspy voice. He pats one of the wooden posts reassuringly. Bran trots beside him, nose in the air, sniffing for any scent of danger. Satisfied that no wolves or thieves are about, Jacob returns to his small stool by the fire. As he settles down, Jacob allows himself a moment to gaze upward. The sky is brilliant with stars now that the moon has set. He recognizes some of the constellations, a knowledge passed down among shepherds. There is the hunter with his belt of 3 stars hovering above the horizon. Over there, the great bear wheels slowly. Watching the steady, predictable motion of the stars gives Jacob comfort. They are like faithful watchmen in the sky, patrolling their eternal routes. "Not long till morning now," he mutters to Bran, scratching the dog behind the ears. The animal thumps its tail lightly on the ground, understanding the tone, if not the words. Jacob knows the stars well enough to judge that it is perhaps 3 or 4 hours from dawn. He reaches for a small pot resting near the fire. Inside is a bit of broth he kept warm from supper. Taking a careful sip, he lets the warmth spread through him. Keeping warm, keeping awake, these are his simple tasks. For him, this quiet vigil is almost meditative. He murmurs a fragment of an old prayer learned in childhood. "From ghoulies and ghosties, and long-leggedy beasties, O Lord, deliver us." A wry smile touches his face. Half in jest, half in earnest he prays, and then falls silent, ears attuned to the slightest irregularity in the night's sounds. Elsewhere, others keep watch in their own modest ways. The village constable, though not on any official duty at such an hour, sleeps lightly with one ear open. He has hung a bell by his cottage door attached to a string. Should the door move or someone try to enter, the bell would jingle and wake him. It's a simple alarm system he devised after hearing of bandits in the region some years ago. Tonight, the bell stays quiet, and he only half dreams of it ringing. In his dreams, he's chasing a thief through dark alleys, but in reality, all is calm. Still, even in sleep, his instincts keep him semi-alert, a protector by nature. If a real alarm were to be raised, say, a cry of fire or help, in the night, he would likely be the first to leap up, grabbing the wooden baton he keeps by his bedside and rushing out to assist. He has done so once or twice in the past, when a neighbor's chimney caught flame at midnight and the entire village was roused. On that occasion, groggy men and women formed a bucket line from the well under the pale moonlight, passing water hand to douse the fire. They succeeded, saving the cottage, and afterwards they all spent the remainder of that night together around the hearth of the newly damp home, reassuring the shaken family until dawn. Such memories live in the constable's bones, reminding him that even in the dead of night, his community can spring into action as one if needed. Tonight, thankfully, no such emergency occurs. But as a precaution, in one cottage, the farmer sleeping nearest to the communal well left his window shutter slightly ajar. Through that small gap, he can hear more clearly if any commotion arises outside. He has done this ever since that chimney fire night. He wants to be ready to hear the first shout. The slight draught makes his room cooler, but he sleeps with a cap on and an extra blanket, content to trade a bit of warmth for peace of mind. Indeed, at one quiet moment in the early hours, he does awaken perhaps from a dream or a subtle noise. Lying still on his straw mattress, he listens carefully. He hears the distant cry of a fox and the soothing gurgle of the well's bucket shifting gently in the breeze. No human voices, no smell of smoke, no frantic hoofbeats on the road. Satisfied, he closes the shutter fully this time, latches it, and returns to sleep, thinking to himself that all is well and secure. Within the houses, the pattern of segmented sleep plays its role in keeping watch. It is common that after some hours of deep rest, many villagers stir and wake for a short while during the night. In that window of wakefulness, often an hour or so, sometime past midnight, people may light a candle and tend to minor tasks, or simply sit in thought. Unbeknownst to them, this habit means that at nearly any given hour, someone in the village is likely awake or half awake. One household's first sleep ends while another's continues, providing a staggered, informal vigil through the long dark. In our family's cottage, the father rolls over and blinks awake. The night has grown colder, and a draught tickles his feet where they peek from under the blanket. Careful not to disturb his wife and children, he eases himself up onto an elbow. The embers in the hearth still emit a faint red glow. He decides to add a bit of fuel to keep the room from becoming too frigid. Quietly, he rises and tiptoes to the hearth. With the poker, he gently stirs the ash aside and finds a couple of robust coals still alive beneath. Taking a small handful of dry kindling kept in a basket nearby, he places it on the coals. He blows softly, cheeks near the hearth, and a tiny flame licks up, brightening the immediate area. The father feeds it just a few slender sticks, enough to sustain a low fire for another hour or two. It's a delicate balance, provide warmth, but not so much flame that it could spark. He watches until the new wood catches and burns steadily, casting a comforting faint light once more on the walls. In that light, He takes a quick survey of his home. The familiar shapes of his family sleeping bring a smile to his lips. All is as it should be. The goats in their pen are quiet. One snorts softly as if dreaming of clover. The dog raises its head, curious, and the man whispers, "Just me, boy." And the dog settles again. Before returning to bed, the father goes to the door and gently lifts the bar a moment to peek outside. Opening the door just a crack, he feels the cold night air on his face. His breath puffs out in a white cloud. The village is dark and silent, save for the faint glow of what might be Jacob's shepherd, fire in the far distance, and a single moving pinprick of light, likely someone walking with a lantern, perhaps one of the miller's sons heading out early to check the water wheel. The father listens. An owl hoots. The church bell does not ring at this hour. Satisfied that no alarm is raised, he quietly shuts the door again and lowers the bar back in place. He offers a simple prayer into the quiet room. Thank you, Lord, for a peaceful night so far. Keep us till morning. Then he returns to his bed, where his wife subconsciously shifts to welcome his warmth again. He pulls the blanket up, feeling a gentle pride and comfort in having done his small duty to guard his household. Within minutes, he's fast asleep once more, the fire he stoked continuing its slow, steady burn. Throughout the village, these small episodes of wakefulness overlap like the shifting watches of a ship's crew. A teenage apprentice at the blacksmith's house, unable to sleep because of a vivid dream, sits up and adds a bit of coal to the forge's embers across the yard. He knows his master likes to have a quick reheat available at dawn. After stirring the coals, the boy steps outside to clear his head. The cold night air shocks him fully awake for a minute. He gazes at the serene scene. Roofs outlined against starlight, a faint plume of smoke here or there from someone else's rekindled hearth. The boy rubs his arms and steps back inside quickly, but not before thinking he saw a shadow move by the tavern, perhaps just the tavern keeper's cat on the prowl. He shrugs it off and bolts the door, firmly deciding that if it were anything amiss, the dogs would be barking. They are not, so all must be well. Comforted by that thought, he crawls back under his blanket, already planning to tease the younger apprentice in the morning for snoring so loudly that it sounded like a bear outside. Even in homes where everyone remains asleep, other guardians keep watch. The dogs, as always, are the village's first line of alert. Their ears twitch at every unusual rustle. A trained hound sleeping by the door will raise its head at the crunch of distant footsteps or the smell of an unfamiliar animal on the breeze. If the noise or scent passes harmlessly, the dog merely huffs and lays back down. But should anything truly threatening come near a stranger's approach, a wolf near the herd, the dog would erupt in barks, rousing not just its household, but likely neighbors too. In the still of these hours, one barking dog sets off a chain reaction. Soon others would bark in sympathy or alarm, and within moments many eyes would be open, scanning the darkness from cracks in shutters or newly opened doors. The villagers know this, and it allows them to rest easier. They have confidence in their animals. Tonight, aside from the brief exchange with the fox earlier, the dogs remain quiet. One or two give solitary barks at times, perhaps chasing something in dreams, but nothing sustained or urgent. Each time a dog sounds off, a few people stir, listen, and when it doesn't continue, they slide back into sleep. The layout of the village itself aids their survival through the night. The cluster of cottages, built close, means that no house stands too isolated. If any household were in distress, a shout or even the noise of struggle would likely be heard by a neighbor. This proximity is a shield against the darkness. Knowing this, each family feels less alone confronting the vast night. They trust that if truly dire trouble visited one of them, the rest would be at their door with lanterns and tools in hand, ready to help. This communal assurance is a kind of psychological watchtower, a beacon of solidarity that shines even when every physical lamp is extinguished. On some nights, particularly when danger was anticipated, the community took more organized measures. In times past, when word came of outlaws roaming the area, a few able-bodied men would agree to take shifts, staying awake, patrolling quietly with pitchforks or bows, just in case. They would walk the perimeter or sit at a central spot, perhaps by the well or under the oak, keeping a sharp ear out. Those nights tended to be tense, and few in the village slept well knowing the threat. But on a normal night like this, no formal patrol is needed. Still, the tradition lingers in the habit of one or two who stay up later than others. Tonight it's Jacob and maybe one other old fellow who couldn't sleep together. Though apart, they act as unofficial sentinels until weariness eventually draws them to their beds as well. There are also the unseen watchmen that some believe protect the village. The more devout will say that angels watch over sleeping children, that each person has a guardian spirit standing by their bedside, warding off evil. The parish priest, Father Anselm, though now asleep himself, would remind them of the words of the Psalms. He who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Many hold these verses close to heart. As a result, some villagers genuinely feel that even if every human eye is closed, they are not truly unguarded. In a way, this faith contributes to their survival as much as any physical precaution. It gives them the courage to close their eyes and rest, believing a higher power is keeping vigil. Those who do remain awake for a time often take advantage of the quiet to do things they otherwise couldn't. An elderly man suffering from aching joints slowly rises from his cot because lying down has become too painful. He sits by his window and gently massages his knees. Outside, a faint light flickers from Jacob's lantern far off. The old man knows it must be Jacob on watch, and gives a nod of thanks in that direction, though Jacob can't see it. The man then occupies himself by sharpening a small knife, by feel and memory, since it's too dim to see clearly. Scrape, scrape, the rhythmic sound is almost musical. It soothes him as his pain subsides a little. When he's done, he feels drowsy enough to attempt sleep again. Before lying down, he peers out one last time and whispers to the night, "Keep us safe till morning." Perhaps he speaks to God, or perhaps to the night itself. Either way, he feels heard. In one home, a wife and husband find themselves awake together in the middle stretch of the night. They had both drifted off early, exhausted, but now a few hours later their eyes open. Realizing the other is also awake, they exchange quiet whispers, careful not to wake the children at their feet. They speak of simple things, the brightness of the stars outside the tiny window, a remembered task that needs doing tomorrow, which draws a chuckle. There's always another chore. A snippet of a dream the husband had about a childhood memory. In the cover of darkness, they also share gentle words of affection that the shyness of daylight might forbid. The wife lays her head on her husband's shoulder as they lie there in the dark, and he wraps an arm around her. For a short while, they simply listen together to the distant hoot of an owl, to a neighbor's muffled cough through the thin wall, to the sound of each other's breathing. In that intimacy, fear has no foothold. Their togetherness is its own form of watchfulness. Each feels that with the other awake beside them, nothing can harm them. After maybe an hour of soft conversation and quiet companionship, they both notice their voices trailing off, sleep creeping back in. The husband gives his wife's hand a reassuring squeeze, and one by one they slip into a second, deeper sleep. For them, this shared vigil has strengthened their bond and will make the morning light feel all the gentler. Bit by bit, as the night advances, those who were awake take their turn returning to rest. Jacob the shepherd finally decides the wolves aren't coming tonight. He adds a few more logs to the fire to keep it going till dawn, and then whistles softly for Bran. Together they retreat into a lean-to, where he can close his eyes for what remains of the night, trusting the embers and his dog to alert him if needed. The intermittent watchers within homes have drifted back off, one by one, satisfied that the night is proceeding without incident. It is as if the baton of watchfulness is passed around, and now near the tail end of night, perhaps only the stars and the slow-burning hearths are left to keep vigil. And yet, even now, the village is not without some consciousness. A few of the older folks often wake in the very early morning hours and simply remain awake, having had their fill of rest. One such man, Jero, sits on the bench outside his front door. He has wrapped himself in a cloak and lit a small lantern which he sets at his feet, more for psychological comfort than light. Gero's old bones ached lying down, so he decided he may as well watch the world until sunrise. He is a familiar sight on certain nights or early mornings, a lone figure quietly sitting, sometimes humming an old hymn. He looks up at the stars and recalls the many nights over decades he's seen just like this. He feels a kinship with the ancient oak at the village edge, standing through nights and days steadily. "We're survivors, aren't we, old friend?" he mumbles to the tree that is just visible down the lane. Gero doesn't expect a response, of course, but in the silence he hears the faint rustle of oak leaves and takes it as an acknowledgement. He chuckles softly, then lapses into a contented, quiet. Gero knows that by being up, he is inadvertently serving the village. If anyone else were in trouble or wandering about, he would notice and lend a hand. He's done it before. Once, years ago, a traveller came staggering into the village at pre-dawn, lost and shivering. Gero had been awake and took the man into his home, warming him and giving him bread before anyone else even knew. Another time, one of the miller's boys woke terrified from a nightmare and ran out of the house in confusion. It was Gero who gently intercepted him in the lane, calmed him, and carried him back to his grateful parents. Now, nothing so dramatic is happening, but Gero keeps his quiet watch nonetheless. It gives him a sense of purpose in his elder years. As he sits, he occupies himself by carving a small piece of wood with a knife, maybe a toy for a grandchild. The scrape of his carving is very soft, blending with the natural hush. His old eyes occasionally sweep over the dark shapes of cottages and fences, alert for any change. There is none. A cat slinks by, likely headed home after its night of hunting, and Gero raises a hand in greeting. The cat pauses to accept a scratch on the head, then slips through a cracked door into its house. All is indeed well. In such ways, through communal care, personal habits, faithful animals, and perhaps a touch of divine guardianship, the village survives each night. Every person does their part, whether they know it or not, simply by being attentive for a few moments when others sleep, by building their homes together, by training their dogs, by praying for safety, by trusting and sharing. It's a tapestry of vigilance, woven so finely that from outside it may seem invisible, but it's undeniably there. Because of it, the villagers can surrender to sleep and darkness without being lost to them. They wake up, more often than not, unharmed and ready to greet a new day. Now, with the darkest hours waning and a subtle greyness gathering far on the eastern horizon, the long night's watch is nearly over. The collective mind of the village seems to exhale in relief. Those awake know that they have nearly made it through. Those asleep begin to stir in anticipation of dawn. Survival tonight has not been in heroic deeds, but in ordinary mindfulness and mutual trust. And as the first faint notes of morning birdsong begin to drift through the air, the vigil gives way to the hopeful act of waiting for the morning light to break. A subtle change comes over the eastern sky. What was once a uniform black begins to soften to a deep indigo. It is the first hint of dawn, still far off, but the night can sense its approach. The village, having endured the long darkness, now finds itself collectively holding its breath, waiting for morning to unfurl. The roosters feel it first. Before any human eyes perceive the coming light, a bold rooster on a farm at the edge of the village lets out another crow clearer and more insistent than the tentative one earlier. Cock-a-doodle-doo, the sound rings out, slicing through the thinning night. This time, the cry is answered by another rooster, closer to the village centre, and then another, until a chorus of cockcrows is echoing from various yards and barns. It is as if they are calling to the sun, urging it upward. In their cosy cottages, several villagers stir at these familiar trumpets of dawn. Old Gero, who has been sitting outside through the final hours of night, chuckles at the rooster's clamour. All right, I hear you," he mutters with a grin. His joints are stiff and cold, but the knowledge that morning is imminent fills him with contentment. He stands slowly from his bench, stretching his back. In the dim pre-dawn light, he can just make out the shape of smoke beginning to rise from one or two chimneys, some early risers already kindling their morning fires. Giro's own breath steams in the cool air as he takes a last look at the paling sky. A lone star still twinkles directly above, soon to be lost in daylight. With a satisfied nod, he picks up his lantern and heads inside to warm himself and prepare for the day's work, silently thanking the night for its peace and the morning for its return. Across the village, the transformation is gentle but steady. The deep blue of the sky turns to a lighter blue, then to a wash of grey. The eastern rim acquires a faint blush of rose and gold. A light mist has formed over the fields during the night's cold, and now it hangs low to the ground like a silvery veil. As the first light strengthens, that mist begins to gleam, every droplet catching the dawn's early rays. The oak tree by the road stands silhouetted against a pearl-coloured sky, its leaves unmoving in the still dawn air. One by one, the nocturnal sounds give way to the noises of morning. The cricket's chirping slows and then ceases. They seek shelter from the coming sun. The owl that dominated the night now falls silent and flaps away to its daytime roost in the hollow of an old barn, passing the baton of song to the smaller birds. In the hedges and trees, sparrows and finches begin to chirp energetically, their mood seemingly as uplifted as the light itself. A blackbird perched on a cottage roof trills a cascading melody, as if to celebrate that a new day has come. This dawn chorus grows by the minute, a cheerful counterpoint to the solemn quiet of the midnight hours. Inside the cottages, sleepers naturally drift toward wakefulness. The darkness inside is not so complete now. Through cracks in shutters and thin curtained windows, the grey pre-dawn glow seeps in. A young boy, who went to bed full and happy, blinks his eyes open as a beam of pale light falls across his face. At first confused, he remembers that it's morning, and a grin spreads across his face even before he's fully conscious. Perhaps at a pleasant dream, or simply the innocence of a new day. He nudges his sister, who buries her face into the blanket to escape the light. In another home, the grandmother, who had struggled in the night, now awakens with relief. The slight weight of daylight on her eyelids tells her it's time. She sits up slowly, joints protesting, but her heart grateful that she's been granted another sunrise. She offers a quiet morning prayer of thanks, each bead of her rosary slipping through her fingers in the cool light that grows stronger by the second. The father who tended the hearth in the dead of night wakes again, this time to see that the embers he fed have nearly burned out. The interior of the cottage is chilly, but he can make out the outlines of his family now without needing a flame. A soft bluish light filters through the gaps around the shutter. He carefully rises, his muscles a bit stiff, and moves to unbar the door. This time, when he opens it, he is greeted not by pitch darkness, but by a dim, misty morning twilight. The air is cold on his face, but it carries a freshness that invigorates him. He looks to the east and sees the sky brightening, clouds tinted pink on their undersides. Taking a deep breath, he feels a wave of reassurance and accomplishment. Another night passed, and all is well. Behind him, he hears his wife stirring and the toddler babbling softly, perhaps woken by the change in the light and the distant crowing of roosters. The mother soothes the child with a gentle hush, knowing it's nearly time to rise. The father steps back inside briefly to stoke the hearth anew for morning. He adds tinder and coaxes flame from the last coals. Soon a cheerful little fire crackles, orange light mingling with the growing grey dawn through the door. The cottage comes alive with a flicker of warmth. The smell of wood smoke freshens. The dog stands and gives a hearty shake, its collar jingling. Then it stretches its front legs out in a long bow, hind quarters up in a satisfying yawn of a stretch. The children rub their eyes and sit up, the girl pulling her blanket around her shoulders against the chill. The boy, now fully awake, scrambles to the window to be the first to remove the shutter. With a little help from his mother, he lifts the latch and swings the wooden shutter open. Cool morning light floods in, and he squints with a smile at the sight. The village outside emerging from shadows, the sky painted with dawn colors. "Morning already," he chirps quietly, careful not to be too loud yet. His younger sister clambers beside him, and together they lean out slightly, seeing the dewy grass and the sleepy village scene. The mist swirls gently as a breeze picks up. They can faintly see a neighbor across the way stepping out of her house with a milk pail, heading to tend her cow. All around, doors begin to creak open and shutters are unlatched. The village, which looked deserted and mysterious all night, now reveals its friendly, familiar face. The baker's wife is up and has reopened the bakehouse chimney vent. Soon a thin wisp of smoke will indicate bread making has started for the day. The miller emerges from his home, wrapping a cloak around himself, and walks toward the mill to harness his mule, his breath puffing white as he hums a morning psalm. Children who went to bed afraid of shadows now giggle as they chase a stray chicken down the lane in the early light, their fears forgotten like bad dreams. Neighbors exchange the first greetings of the day, a wave here, a nod there, voices still hushed out of respect for those not yet awake. The earth is drenched with dew. Blades of grass sparkle when the first rays of direct sunlight peek over the distant hills. A low ray catches the puddles by the well, making them glint like little mirrors. A few villagers stepping outside pause to marvel at the beauty of the dawn, something they may see every day, but which never loses its quiet magic after a long night. The sky's colors shift from pink and gold to a clear morning blue. The last star winks out. The sun's edge becomes visible, a sliver of brilliant light breaking the horizon. As it rises, the mist in the fields begins to lift and dissipate, revealing rows of crops and the outlines of distant trees. Birds swoop through the air with renewed energy, searching for breakfast insects stirred by the sun. In the church, Father Anselm has already risen to say his matins prayers at first light. He rings the small handbell in the chapel 3 times, a gentle signal to the village that morning devotion is underway. The sound is light and silvery, not at all like the heavy iron bell of curfew. Some villagers cross themselves when they hear it, whispering a quick morning prayer of their own. Gratitude for surviving the night, for the return of daylight, for the daily bread they hope to earn once more. Others, busy with chores like milking goats or kneading dough, simply smile at the familiar bell, taking it as the final confirmation that night is truly over. With the arrival of sunlight, the terrors of the dark melt away like frost in warmth. What a few hours ago seemed like potential ghosts or lurking monsters are revealed as nothing more than a draping cloak on a hook, a pile of logs by a fence, or the old scarecrow standing harmlessly to the side of the field. A sense of relief is palpable in the crisp morning air. Mothers who kept a worried vigil over sick children find those children resting easier now, perhaps still ill, but peacefully sleeping in the glow that filters through the window. Those children who had nightmares now barely recall them, their heads filled instead with thoughts of the day's play and tasks. The oppressive weight that darkness can bring has lifted, and everyone's world feels wider and safer once again. The villagers begin to talk to one another in earnest as they start their day. "Good morning," calls a man fetching water from the well to a neighbor carrying firewood. "Good morning, thank God," she replies, smiling and balancing her bundle of wood. 2 women, who will later bake bread together, exchange comments about the weather now visible. One notes the fine, clear sky, hoping it stays that way for laundry. The other remarks on the heavy dew, promising a mild day. These simple conversations, spoken in low voices over fences and across doorsteps, reaffirm normalcy. They stitch the community back together after the long hours spent isolated in individual homes. Surviving the night feels like a shared accomplishment, even if nothing out of the ordinary occurred. One can sense it in the hearty slaps on shoulders between friends, in the way a mother cheerfully opens her windows to let the dawn breeze in, chasing out the stale night air. The blacksmith's apprentices, now awake, stoke the forge and joke with each other as they ready for the hammering to come, neither admitting if they had any frights in the dark. The widow martyr opens her door and steps out to feed her chickens. The earlier scare she had just a memory that makes her shake her head with a wry smile in the daylight. She scatters grain and whispers to her hens, "I'm a silly old woman, jumping at shadows." The hens cluck around her feet, solid and real, and she feels grounded and foolish for having been so afraid. But no harm done the light has absolved the night's fears. Little by little, the warmth of the rising sun touches every corner of the village. It shines on the cross atop the church, making it gleam. It filters through the young leaves of the trees, casting playful patterns on the ground. In one cottage, a sunbeam creeps across the floor and reaches a sleeping cat, who blinks awake and rolls over to bask in it. In another, the sunlight hits a dangling prism of glass in the window, throwing tiny rainbows on the wall that a toddler delightedly tries to catch. Each home receives this blessing of morning light, unique in how it falls, yet universal in what it brings renewal. Now fully daybreak, the last traces of night's blue shadows slip away. The village is bathed in soft morning light, and a gentle hustle and bustle begins. Smoke rises steadily from more chimneys as breakfasts are prepared, perhaps a thin porridge or leftover crusts warmed by the fire. The comforting scents of bread and porridge start to waft in the cool air. Animals call for their morning feed. Cows low from their sheds. Pigs squeal expectantly in their sties. Goats bleat until someone comes with a bucket of fodder. These everyday sounds are a welcome cacophony, the sound of life continuing its reliable cycle. For the people of the village, waiting for morning was an exercise in patience and faith, and that faith is rewarded. The morning has arrived not as a sudden blaze, but as a slow, graceful unveiling of color and light. In many hearts there is a quiet celebration. Another night has been conquered. There is bread to bake, fields to tend, wagons to repair, and children to teach. The worries of the night are folded away like a blanket and set aside until perhaps they creep in again at the next sundown. But that is many hours away, and the sun is shining, and roosters are crowing vigorously, as if to say, "Be gone, darkness, your time is done." The village carries on, but not without remembering for a moment the gift of this new day. As the first golden sunlight spills down the village lane, illuminating the faces of neighbors greeting one another, there is a pervasive sense of gratitude. One could almost imagine the village itself as a living being, stretching its limbs after a long sleep, smiling in the glow of dawn. They have survived the night together and individually, and now everything that seemed daunting a few hours ago appears manageable or even small. The sunlight reaches into even the most hidden nooks, the alley behind the tavern, the hollow of the old oak, the dim corners of each cottage, assuring all that nothing dreadful hid there after all. And so, the long night in the medieval village gently yields to day, leaving behind only the soft echoes of dreams and the memory of a peaceful, if sometimes uneasy night. The omniscient night narrator falls silent, its duty done, as human voices and life once again take center stage. The village breathes in the light, ready to greet whatever the new day will bring. Comforted by the knowledge that come the next dusk, they will light their fires, bar their doors, whisper their prayers, and bravely face the night once more, together. For now, though, roosters crow and children chatter, and the sun ascends, ever faithful, dispelling the last vestiges of darkness over the tranquil homes of the medieval village. When we look back at a single night in a medieval village, it becomes clear that life itself was an act of endurance. Warmth was never guaranteed, food was never abundant, sleep was rarely deep or uninterrupted. Each night demanded attention, patience, and quiet courage. People slept close to one another, not for comfort, but for survival. They trusted fire, even as they feared it. They listened to the dark and learned to live with uncertainty. The medieval night was long, cold, and filled with silence. Yet within that silence, life continued, breath by breath, hour by hour. There were no promises of ease, only the hope of morning. And for those who survived the night, the simple arrival of dawn was enough. Thank you for spending this night with us. If you are still awake, may the quiet of this story stay with you a little longer. And if sleep has found you, may it be deep, calm, and untroubled. Wherever you are in the world, we wish you a peaceful night and a gentle morning.